This is Assignment 3, Athlete's Lifestyle. Factors for types of media interviews, with the first one being television. Athletes must make sure during television interviews that their communication is clear and open. This is a skill that can develop with practice and experience. Athletes also may have to give interviews to journalists from local and national television, or attend press conferences to give their own views on individual or team performances. This is why it is important for them to understand how to communicate verbally and non-verbally in a professional way. As a result of this, it can raise the profile of the athlete and their sport, presenting them in a positive light. Types of effective communication are needed for this type of interview, for an athlete to promote themselves in their sport. The four that I'm going to be talking about is body language, speech/language, appearance, and communicating accurately and clearly. Body language. During television interviews, it is vital that athletes involve appropriate type of body language, including body movements and gestures such as hand gestures, smiling and nodding to those they are being interviewed by. Body language is key for athletes to use during these processes because it can help communication and will show whether the person will understand or is acknowledging what you are saying. However, it is important that body language is understood by those using it and how it affects the way you may be perceived. An example of this is if the person being interviewed was to yawn. This would show their lack of interest during the interview. Also to this, having their arms crossed can also indicate lack of openness. Speech/use of language. Another factor that is used during television interviews is the speech or use of language that may be used by the athlete when being interviewed. It's essential that when yourself as an athlete is presenting any sort of information that you use the correct language. This includes having a clear voice, using words that should be pronounced properly, and having the correct grammar. If the athlete was to swear or use slang as their use of language during the interview, then this would give a wrong impression to those watching the television because it would be disrespectful and rude and may even ruin their sporting reputation. As well as this, any difficult or unfamiliar words that the athlete cannot pronounce should be practiced beforehand. Appearance. The third factor that is key for athletes to use is appearance. This is vital as the person who interviews the athlete will judge them on their appearance, and they should ensure that they have a good, clean appearance. This would be seen as their first impressions, and they wouldn't want to mess it up. So, from the interviewer meeting the athlete for the first time, they will quickly form an option on them based on the different factors. An example of having the correct appearance for television interviews is considering to have clean and tidy clothes such as neat kit, which the athlete should already be in, and good personal hygiene, which would give a good first impression. If the athlete was to have loads of jewellery or makeup on, then this wouldn't give a good impression on them. Therefore, it is vital that athletes set the tone from their impression towards a relationship, so they must look and act professional. Communicating accurately and clearly. This factor considers the athlete communicating effectively with the interviewer. There are verbal and non-verbal forms of communication which is done through speech, body language, and gestures. However, this factor focuses on mainly communicating through speech. Athletes will give information and knowledge through communication, and they must be able to do this accurately and clearly. An example of this can be showing good active listening skills, asking questions or having discussions with people. If the athlete was to mumble or not have the correct grammar when communicating, then this would cause disruption during the interview process. Therefore, it is a skill which can be developed with practice and can even have a significant effect on the learning process as well as sporting performance. The next type of media interview is radio. Many interviews are conducted by local or national radio stations, which is often immediately after sporting performance. Interviewers expect athletes to give a clear evaluation and opinion from sporting performance. So, it is important that the athlete conveys this in a clear and professional manner. There's many radio interviews that are broadcasted live, so it's essential for communication to be precise and accurate from the athlete, even though they may feel tired or disappointed after losing a match. This type of media used by athletes includes different types of effective communication, in which should be considered by athletes who are being interviewed. And the four I will be talking about is speech, pace, preparation for communication, speech, intonation and clarity, and language. Speech, pace. During a radio interview, athletes should be aware of how they talk during this process. This involves speaking with a clear voice with accurate pronunciation. This is to ensure those who are listening have a clear understanding of what they are saying. In order for a presentation to be successful and the audience to be involved and interested, they must consider the pace that they are going to talk at. An example of this is that if they speak too quickly, then people will not be able to follow what they are saying, as well as if they were to speak too slowly, then people may become bored. Preparation for communication. This factor needs to be considered by athletes in radio interviews, as it can lead to a good performance. The saying of fail to prepare, prepare to fail can be true when discussing things like coaching, performance, and communication. Preparation can include the athlete doing research, writing scripts, prompt sheets, and rehearsals for their communication, which can prevent poor performance. When the athlete is dealing with the media, it's essential for them to prepare for communication as part of a press conference or live interview. An example of this is for the athlete to be able to convey information in a clear and concise manner in order for understanding to take place and for embarrassment and controversial moments to be avoided. Speech, intonation and clarity. This factor should be used by athletes in these types of interviews. What the athlete is saying might affect the intonation and clarity of their verbal communication. Intonation is the pitch and pattern of your voice, and clarity is how clear you speak. An example of how it may be used by athletes is if they were to speak very slowly in a non-expressive voice, then it can be difficult for others to understand. As well as this, if they were speaking with a lively, fast-paced voice, then it can also be difficult for others to understand due to them speaking so fast. Athletes should learn how to use their own voice in the way that creates interest. Language. An athlete's language is key to be used appropriately when being interviewed by the media. When they give information about either themselves or their sporting career, it is vital that they use the correct language to sound very professional. This includes their voice being clear, with the words that they say being pronounced properly. As mentioned for television interviews, the athlete should avoid using slang or swearing, as this would give a wrong impression from the media to the athlete. Again, any difficult or unfamiliar words that the athlete isn't sure with should be practiced beforehand. Factors considered with significant others. There are a number of factors that need to be considered with the following significant others, and I will be talking about club/regional/national coaches, sponsors, match officials, and managers. Club, regional, and national coaches. When communicating with these types of coaches, a factor that the athlete must consider using when communicating with them is the use of active listening skills. Successful athletes will work with a number of coaches and will want what their coaches expect from them in order to reach collective sporting goals. The relationship that you as an athlete has with your coaches should be professional, honest, and open in order for goals and performances to be discussed. If the athlete does not have listening skills, then this can affect their performance, as they will not know what is expected in a task or situation. Further to this, it could lead to confusion, frustration, or even injury. Clear communication between athletes and coaches should be open, as they can rely on each other to get good results. Sponsors. When communicating with sponsors, athletes should consider their timing to be used effectively. Event or individual sponsors are important sources of income for athletes in their sports. When communicating with them, the athlete should be courteous and professional at all times and ensure they communicate with an appropriate manner. Athletes may be required to attend meetings, which means that timing is vital for them to consider, so they can present themselves in the best light. It would also give a good impression to the sponsor if the athlete was to turn up early to the meetings. As well as their timing, their verbal and non-verbal communication should show they are interested in the sponsor's contributions. Match officials. Match officials are very important and an essential part of playing competitive sport. Athletes will need to respect the officials' decisions during and after matches, and this combines with the athlete communicating accurately and clearly towards the match officials. This is because respect would be shown from both sides, as well as a professional conversation to take place. By communicating accurately and clearly, the athlete can do this towards the match officials by asking questions if they was unsure about something, and also having discussions with them. Having this type of communication to match officials should be clear, open, and respectful for the game to continue without any disruption. Managers. Communicating with managers is essential for athletes to do, and respect should be shown. Managers are responsible for the athlete's sporting affairs, and they often have to make difficult or unpopular decisions. They do this by either selecting a team or even dropping an athlete who has been underperforming. The factor that an athlete should use when communicating with their managers is their use of language. Using the correct language towards managers, such as having a clear voice, will show respect and courtesy. If they were to use slang or swear towards their managers, then this would be rude and disrespectful and could possibly ruin their sporting career.